Hello, good afternoon. My name is Laura Burbano. I am the admissions advisor for the Sport and Performance Psychology and Clinical Mental Health Counseling program. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen so that we can go over some important items. So for today's schedule, we're going to have the panel of experts, Dr. Sarah Castillo, Dr. Michelle Cox, and Dr. Amy Ohana. All of them are faculty members and the program directors also from the Sport and Performance Psychology and the Clinical Mental Health Counseling programs. At the end of the webinar session, we will have an admissions presentation with information on the application documents and also some deadlines. So what to expect today? So as I mentioned before, we will have 3 faculty members from the SPP and the CMHC departments. Our faculty will cover the following topics: professional identity development, also how this idea of professional identity development aligns with the UWS curriculum for the SPP and the CMHC programs. And then we're going to explore a little bit about the scope of practice with these particular degrees. So you are in listen-only mode. If you have questions to ask, please start by typing them in the Q&A box, and we will try to address as many live questions as we can from the audience. So we're going to start. So please help me to welcome Dr. Castillo, Dr. Cox, and Dr. Amy Ohana.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone. Welcome from wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, this is great. So, okay, so let's start. If you can please sort of like introduce yourselves and let us know about your role currently at UWS so that our audience can get to know you better.
I'm Dr. Sarah Castillo. I am the director of the Sport and Performance programs here at UWS. I'm relatively new to the university. I just started in March, so I'm still sort of getting my sea legs under me, but excited to move forward and welcome all of you to us.
Hi, all. I'm Dr. Michelle Cox. I'm the director of the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program. I've been with UWS almost 4 years in January, and I designed the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program from scratch, from the bottom up. Super proud of the way that it's grown, the way that we have found faculty that are really dedicated to the idea of integration of sport and performance with clinical mental health counseling, and just happy to serve our students every day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Amy Ohana, and I live in Bend, Oregon. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Oregon and a full-time core faculty member in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program. This is my 18th year as a full-time counselor educator. I've done this for a while. I love what I do. I love what I teach. I love being a counselor. And I'm excited that you're here so that I can help you become a counselor if that is indeed your career goal.
Thank you so much. So we're going to start sort of with specific questions that some of our applicants sent previously. But if you have any particular questions that you want to ask to our panel of experts, please, as I mentioned before, start typing them in the Q&A box, and then we'll just address as many as we can. So the first question has to be specifically with the idea or the word professional identity. So what does the word professional identity entail? And in your professional experience and from your academic expertise, how do you define the word? So anybody can start.
How about if I start a little bit? I think that concept of professional identity is probably most salient in terms of how it relates to what we actually do every day with either our credential or our clinical license. And in the field of counseling in particular, there has been a lot of emphasis placed on distinguishing between what it is to be a counselor or a marriage and family therapist, or a social worker or a psychologist, there's always been this sort of infighting, to be very direct, about who is allowed to do what and with which types of clients. We are believers in developing professional identity in appropriate ways, participating in your state and national associations, giving back to the field, being a good representation as a clinician or a counselor educator. But at UWS, we're really not focused on the divisiveness or division of the different types of providers, because if you really understand how each of those providers are trained to contribute to the development of an individual, then you start to see that there is as much value in clinical mental health counseling as marriage and family therapy, as social work, as psychology, as sport and performance psychology. So the identity development really comes in how you want to further your career with an emphasis on your actual practice. That's just my 2 cents.
I'll add a bit to that and maybe extend it a little. I sort of see professional identity as something that also develops over time. We go through and you'll learn quite a bit at UWS about where you're starting and what your interests are and what your career goals are and how to move in that direction. But really, over time and with additional experience, that professional identity will continue to grow. You'll be more comfortable in what you believe, why you believe that. Your philosophical orientation, your theoretical orientation will strengthen and maybe shift over time. And so while it's definitely important, and one of the things that we strive for is to have all of our graduates leave with a strong sense of their professional identity, know that that's something that will actually change. The longer that you're in your prospective field, the longer that you are a sport and performance consultant or a licensed mental health counselor as you move.
So is there anything else that you want to add, Dr. Ohana, or can we transition to the next?
I think those are wonderful answers. I would add that when I teach a class, I try to be very aware of my students and where they plan to work or practice, and ask them very intentionally around that to help them develop their own unique professional identity that is in alignment with if they've chosen to be a clinical mental health counselor and or an SPP professional, so that they can begin thinking about that all throughout their curriculum.
Thank you so much. So the next question specifically has to do with the classes that we are teaching in our sport and performance psychology and clinical mental health counseling programs. So what classes in the SPP and CMHC departments will help me to have a better understanding of professional identity development?
This one is a sort of an easy question to answer, but sort of a challenging question to answer. Dr. Cox and I have been really intentional about the courses that our students are going to take. And so the real answer is every single one of them is going to lead toward not only your professional identity development, but your professional competency. There isn't a class that lives in either the core requirements, those courses that all of our students take, or within the elective options that we have, that doesn't directly impact your development, your practice, and your eventual competence in your field.
I'm going to let Dr. Ohana talk a little bit about the career course in a minute. I agree with Dr. Castillo, but I will just pull out a few examples so students can get some examples of like assignments in courses. Our ethics course has a professional development plan assignment. It's sort of the ultimate assignment in that course, due in the final weeks of the course, that are designed to help you after you've learned about the ethics of both fields, by the way, designed to help students really identify who they want to be as a clinician or a consultant, what that will look like, what tasks they need to develop, task skills, information they need to have, who they're going to need to work for, what associations they belong to. So really thoughtful questions meant to cause students to reflect on who they might want to be as professionals in their fields. Another example is our, let's see, a pre-practicum course would be a great example. Our students in our clinical mental health counseling programs take that pre-practicum course to learn the skills and knowledge necessary to actually sit with clients, including assessment, diagnosis, and treatment. But some assignments in those courses are designed to help students redesign a resume so that it's more attractive to those in clinical mental health counseling fields. We teach students how to design answers to common interview questions. We teach them how to find and prioritize the types of organizations they want to work with, and then reach out to those in professional ways. And then I'll let Dr. Ohana talk a little bit about the career course.
Now or should I just address that question?
If you want to do just a little bit now and then save all the fun for later.
Oh, okay. So one of the courses that you will take in this program is career counseling, and oftentimes counselors and SPP professionals wonder why do I have to take this course? What does this have to do with clinical mental health counseling? So you'll learn about how vocational identity fits in with your professional identity, and how in your own learning and exploration, you can then help a client, whether it's as someone in a clinical mental health setting or it's an athlete on the field, how you can help your client or student or person you're working with develop their own vocational identity. Vocation being different slightly than career. It's a more encompassing term. So I'll talk about, I think there's a specific question about the career course, so I'll stop for now on that.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just want to clarify a little bit. So for the audience, so we are during this webinar addressing or we are talking about this idea of professional identity, across all the programs that we offer. So we offer a master's in clinical mental health counseling. Then we have the clinical track of the doctoral program in sport and performance psychology with the clinical mental health counseling specialization, and then the non-clinical or a standalone doctoral program in sport and performance psychology, and also a graduate certificate in applied sports psychology. So everything that we are exploring and the classes that our faculty are talking about are classes that are throughout the curriculum in these programs across all the offering that we have. So for the next question then, we have how the SPP and the CMHC programs will help me to become a better professional. In other words, what are the kind of tools that these online programs will offer me to network and create meaningful professional opportunities in the field?
Boy, do I have to start with this one? Well, let's start by saying that you can't be a clinician. You can't be a mental health counselor unless you have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. So that's sort of an obvious answer, right? In terms of why this program, what is it about this particular program that's going to help me be like the kind of professional you might want to be, is that, and I won't lie about this, I'm a clinical mental health counseling snob. Like my expectations for our graduates are high. When we place them at sites, I want every site supervisor going, oh my goodness, we need to hire you. You understand your clinical responsibilities, your ethical responsibilities, you're on time with the work that you do, you have excellent skills, you know how to engage these people, you understand assessment, diagnosis, treatment planning, how to write clinical notes, how to engage, and we're seeing the outcomes for clients in our facility. We want those of you who are pursuing the doctorate to choose dissertations that allow you to publish, or the mentorship experience that allow you to get your CMPC. We want you out there making waves. Our students are ahead of the trend. Our students are the ones that are teaching both fields, clinical mental health counseling and the world of sport and performance, that mental health and sport and performance issues are not separate. Now, how we teach you to do that matters, and how we teach you to do that is unique to UWS. But our goal is that you are making waves out in the professional world once you've graduated.
I think another big piece, and again, this is sort of an additional add to that question, is the idea that one of the things that we're trying to learn is not only trying to teach, is not only are these fields related, but they still remain very distinct in terms of how you're practicing. And that's one of the pieces that our programs present, that not every program involved in sport and performance and clinical mental health counseling actually go over. So I think that's a huge benefit in our program that doesn't exist in a whole lot of other places.
And I would just add the fact that you're doing it online, it means it's a really good thing. We know how to do online learning really well. We were doing it before the world had to. So our faculty have good pedagogy and online teaching methods. You as a student learning online will know how to use those skills, how to effectively communicate, use technology as a tool to reach your future clients. So yeah, I think that is a huge strength to this program.
Thank you so much. So the next question specifically is in regards to the differences in terms of a scope of practice between a licensed professional counselor and a certified mental performance consultant. Are these two titles similar, different, or complementary, and how?
Once again, I get the short answer, right, which is yes. So as I sort of alluded to in the last question, so my answer is probably better suited to this one. The entire sort of mental health continuum of a performer, of an individual, is sort of what gets addressed in the UWS programs. And so I want you to think about the idea that mental health is, again, an overall continuum, with mental illness living on sort of one side of that, and I don't know, mental, help me, different than wellness. I can't think of the term right now, Dr. Cox. Mental strength.
I like the word strength. I think you should adopt that.
There we go. And sort of mental strength, exceptional mental performance on the other end. And so while an individual can sort of, in different parts of their life, in different parts of their performance, move between those sorts of places, they're not all treated by the same person. And so when you think of the work that a licensed mental health counselor would do, you're probably looking more at the work in restorative performance. So helping someone who is suffering or who is impacted by mental health that is invading and sort of holding them back from what would be considered sort of typical or normal or exceptional performance. While a certified mental performance consultant tends to do the work on the opposite side of that continuum, where someone is actually performing reasonably well, absent any mental illness or clinical issue, and looking to sort of improve their performance to the other end of that spectrum. Now, that being said, right, you might think there's some gray area in the middle. Absolutely right. And so the idea behind the training that you'll get at UWS and in our programs is to be able to identify the very obvious differences between mental illness, mental strength, and where that lives on the continuum. But more importantly, to figure out where that line is and where your particular training and your particular relationship with that performer lives, and what you should be doing when it gets a little more gray. in the middle. I think that's and I'll let Michelle and Amy talk a little bit more to that. But for me, I think that's the most important piece that our program tackles that isn't always addressed, is what to do when it looks like something you could do. It looks like something you feel like you might be able to address. How do you make that decision, and what's the process then?
And I can speak to the scope of practice for a licensed professional counselor. A license is issued by a state, and typically all states have what they call a scope of practice as defined by statute. That means the law specifically says, here's what a licensed professional counselor or equivalent does. And it usually has to do with the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of mental disorders. So that means, as Dr. Castillo was talking about the scope of practice from a mental health consultant, a licensed professional counselor would specifically look at mental disorders as defined by the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and treat those mental disorders. And as you can see, both roles can be used in conjunction. They can be referrals. They can be one professional with two scopes of practice, determining what the client needs in that moment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ohana and Dr. Castillo and Dr. Cox. So we have a very interesting question in regards to what program to choose if already the applicant has a licensed professional counselor license, if they want to set up a specific mental health program for athletes. So will that be better, the doctoral program then, the standalone doctoral program with any of the concentrations, or the graduate certificate will be better? So I will just, yeah.
Sure. So I'll let you know that the integrated degree, if you already have your license, if you're already a mental health professional, a licensed counselor, this is not a program that you are eligible for. So depending on what you want to do in developing this program for athletes or performers, that's actually going to be, that'll help you make the decision better. If you have a prior degree in licensed mental health counseling and you want to go and become a certified mental performance consultant to be able to work on the performance side as well, certainly the certificate is something, it's only 6 courses, and you'll be able to meet the requirements for the CMPC, Certified Mental Performance Consultant, as far as the coursework. And then you'll have to, on your own, do 400 hours of mentored or supervised experience, specifically in delivering performance enhancement plans to performers. And again, performance enhancement, very different from clinical mental health services. So bringing back sort of what we talked about earlier, these are very different, although complementary pieces. So if you want to do clinical work with athletes and you want to remain doing clinical work only, the certificate may be great, the doctorate may be great, just to give you an idea of sort of the difference in culture in athletics, the difference in how, in development, in sort of how performers and competitive performers have sort of moved through life at this point, to give you maybe a better understanding, higher levels of empathy development, rapport development, et cetera, et cetera. If you're looking to work with competitive performers in a performance enhancement capacity, then whatever program you choose needs to be bolstered by that additional supervised experience.
And if I can just add, because I think we're sort of getting around an idea that I want to be absolutely clear about for our applicants. One of the values of either the integrated degree Or if you're like this applicant who asked that question, someone who has a clinical degree and may want to pursue the SPP degree, or somebody who is already, let's say, a certified mental performance consultant and has an SPP degree and may just want the master's in clinical mental health counseling. We are preparing you to have multiple, what I call income streams. So you can have a practice or work in an organization as a sport and performance psychology consultant. You could work as a clinical mental health counselor in an agency or private practice. You can teach. If you've already come out of the world of sport and performance or clinical mental health counseling, you could coach or be an administrator. The goal of these degrees is to give you as many income options and career options as possible. Yet, we will never allow you or teach you to do both roles with one client. So if I start working with a client who needs clinical mental health counseling, and I have a number of them who are, let's say, athletes and performers, and they said, now that my mental health is pretty sound, I can see how it was impacting my performance. Can we switch and have you do some performance work so that I can be a better runner or whatever? My response is no, and here's Dr. Castillo's number. Because I should never cross that boundary line from the role that I started with an individual to the other role that I may be competent, capable of, or trained appropriately for, but that's never appropriate from our perspective. And that's one of the unique parts of our programs here at UWS.
Thank you so much, Dr. Castillo and Dr. Cox. So the next question is specifically, what are some of the topics I will be able to learn in your career counseling class from the EDD SPP CMHC program? So this is the doctoral program in sport and performance psychology with the clinical mental health counseling specialization. Will this class only address professional identity in the counseling profession, or is there overlap between sport and performance psychology and clinical mental health counseling content?
Well, great question. I teach career counseling and I'm actually rewriting that course right now. So to very specifically answer that question, I would say that the class is written to fulfill the competencies of career counseling. So if you plan to license in your state as a licensed professional counselor, the course will meet the requirements that your licensing board will ask you to meet. However, the philosophy that I approach career counseling with is more around vocational identity, which has more to do with one's purpose and meaning and contribution to the world. In that encompasses lots of different roles. And in the case studies and in the work and assignments in the course, I've asked students to really focus on the population that they want to work with after they graduate. So that means that someone who wants to coach elite athletes, I'd like them to do their case study work with that in mind, with that population in mind, and perhaps find a volunteer to help them develop that. And then in the approach to career counseling, the course is written according to the narrative approach of career counseling, which is really a personal story of the client. You as the student, your own personal career story, as well as the personal career story of the client. If you plan to focus on a clinical mental health counseling practice, again, you would be encouraged to look at vocational development, career theory as applied to those populations. And if you have, whoever asked that question, if you have more specific questions, feel free to chat me personally or send me an email.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ohana. So our next question is regarding accreditation. So we have recently learned that UWS is pursuing MPCAC accreditation as opposed to CACREP accreditation for its counseling program. Can you explain how this will impact potentially my ability to become a licensed professional counselor? I want to work both as an LPC and a CMPC.
Thank you for that great question. It's timely, so I appreciate the opportunity to address it. First, let me remind you of what Dr. Ohana told us earlier, which is that states govern licensure for clinicians. And each state, which is very hard for programs such as ours all over the United States, each state offers a different licensure requirement. They're all very similar, but each state sets its own guidelines. In every state, though, they require programs to be regionally accredited, and our university is and has been for decades. We're regionally accredited by NWCCU. Now, the specific field accreditation, which is what we're pursuing with the MPCAC, is offered by that organization and another organization called that we abbreviate to CACREP. In the past, CACREP was the only field-specific accreditor for counseling and worked very, very hard to try to develop standards that would be consistently applied to all programs that then states would rely on to know that their students who, or the applicants who are applying for licensure actually got the education and training that was really necessary to do a good job as a clinician. MPCAC came maybe a decade and a half ago and said, hey, CACREP isn't the only potential accreditor of these programs. We originally decided to pursue CACREP accreditation because we knew that there were a number of states who were moving toward CACREP only programs, meaning they would only accept transcripts from programs who were CACREP accredited when the applicant was pursuing licensure in those states. A number of those states who've tried to implement those CACREP only laws have lost those fights, meaning the legislature has overturned those rulings to allow other accreditors opportunity in this specific field. As we looked at our options between CACREP, which was what we originally thought we would pursue, and MPCAC, what we realized is that because CACREP has been around for quite a long time, they have a number of applications already submitted and could not guarantee us any length of time in terms of how long it would take them to evaluate our self-study, how long it would take them to do a site review, and when we could potentially count on any type of accreditation. And that became a significant barrier because we value accreditation and we want to pursue that. Another issue that we had, or concern that we had with CACREP, is the very focused counselor identity language. We've talked earlier in this conversation about the importance of developing counselor identity without overly focusing on limiting the value or disparaging other roles in the field. We have a very unique integrated program that is not going away. We love it. It's ahead of the trend. It's making a difference in the world of sport and performance, and we are not moving away from this integrated degree. We're having a hard time understanding how to translate the integration of counseling and sport and performance psychology with an accreditor that only wanted us to talk about counseling. MPCAC has a different approach. They value the various counseling and psychology identities, and therefore they allow us to utilize and actually appreciate the integration of the two fields. And so for us, it was a much better fit. And then in terms of timeline, they have a different process and a different timeline. So we felt like to serve our current and incoming students, the timeline for MPCAC would be much better in terms of accreditation.
So just to clarify, so then students will not have an impact, like a negative impact, in terms of pursuing their license in their state. Is this correct? Just to
We know of currently 3 states in which there is still existing legislation to make them KCREP only states in the future. Florida is an example of that. However, we also know that those legislative issues are being challenged. And so we don't know the outcome. And so we try to be very attentive to where our applicants are from when they are applying either to the MS and CMHC or the EDD, the integrated degree. In addition, there are some states that use KCREP or similar language. And in the majority of those states, regardless, you are required to submit not only your transcripts, but your syllabi from courses. And there are even organizations nationally that students can pay that will actually compare the course syllabi from courses they took to the requirements of the state to assure the state that the student has met the requirements, even when they're not KCREP accredited. Part of our responsibility, and we take it seriously, is that we are with our students even beyond graduation. We have an alumni survey, we get data from our alumni, we want to know who's working, who's not, who's pursuing licensure and who's not, whether there's difficulty pursuing licensure. And as a program director, I actually have to sign off on documentation for a number of states, affirming the number of clinical hours that were worked, affirming that the student is a fit for the profession. And so our relationship with our students extends far beyond graduation, and part of that is helping them with the process of application toward licensure. We can never, and this is true for Dr. Castillo's program as well, we can never guarantee that somebody is license eligible or CMPC eligible, because there are national and state tests that need to be taken. There are rules about criminal background checks. There are a variety of components that go into application. However, our job up front, and actually a requirement of our program, is that we provide all of this information up front to every applicant seeking admission into our CMHC programs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cox, for that response. So the next question is, what will be some key values that have guided your life as a practitioner in the field of counseling and sport and performance psychology?
I'm laughing a little bit at this. This is a great question. Humor. You're going to deal with the shit of life, people. So you better be able to laugh at it. Sorry to be so blunt, but that's kind of the way it rolls. You know, being flexible, being able to just roll with things, being able to see the joy and humor and things that are really hard, and learning how to deal with just the trauma of the work. There's a lot of, you're going to hear a lot of difficult stuff and carry it with you. And if you have your own difficult stuff, a willingness to be able to work through it.
I think as far as sport and performance and my sort of professional philosophy goes, I really look at my role with performers as collaborative. There's a lot of stuff that I know, but I don't know how to be a lineman on a Division II football team. I don't know. I don't know how to be a soldier in combat. And so much of the way I approach any clients or any performers that I work with is really that there are things that I can share, and there's an education I can provide, but it has to fit and work within that particular person's performance. So there isn't anything that I know that makes me any better or any more put together than any one of the performers I work with. I'm 100% there as an educator and someone to help that particular performer make sense of and improve what's going on in their particular life and their particular experience. I also sort of come from a place where, again, if we think of that continuum I mentioned earlier, the people that I work with and the people that I work for a long time with are doing pretty well before I get there. And so again, I'm constantly making sure that that we're working together in terms of what can I offer and how is it that we can work together to get you where you need to go, to get you where your goals lead.
I agree with all those things. And I will say, after 20 years as a clinician, mental toughness is probably my biggest asset. As Dr. Ohana shared, we hear the worst of life. And you have to be able to compartmentalize that, but also process it in ways that are healthy. And one of the things that few people talk about in terms of the counseling profession is that we are counselors 24/7. We have comportment clauses in our field that require us to behave ethically, professionally, and thoughtfully in every setting, all day long, every day, which means we also have to have very full lives. We have to have loving partners and create healthy relationships with peers and colleagues and friends. We have to find joy where we can find it. We have to pursue health, wellness, exercise. We have to do all of those things. And so there, it feels to me, and I may be the only one, but it feels to me like there's just no slacking in my world. Everything we do matters, and that's a lot to carry around. And earnestly, I can't wait till the day I retire. And I absolutely love what I do for a living.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cox, Dr. Ohana, and Dr. Castillo. So the next question is specifically, could you please share insights about the way you see the advance of counselors and performance consultants in today's world? There is a huge explosion of wellness-related professionals such as life coaches, relationship coaches, wellness coaches, etc.
I agreed to take the hit for this answer because I have very strong opinions. I would not consider life coaches, relationship coaches, and wellness coaches professionals in the same way that I consider our graduates professionals. Our graduates are held to significantly rigorous standards for content, theory, approaches to how people become well and how they become dysfunctional. We attend to mental health disorders, the way the brain works, pharmacology, psychobiology, neurobiology. We attend to physiology. I mean, there is so much detail in how we attend. And then in addition to that, for the clinical mental health counseling folks, just in the program, we work about 700 hours for an internship. And of that 700, that's 280 direct client contact hours where you're providing care. So that's practice. And then once you graduate in this field, you go out and you earn between 2,400 and 3,000 more hours before the state will hand you a license as a clinician, and that's dependent on each state's requirements. The amount of work and energy, effort, training, content that you amass as students in this program and as professionals in these fields is significantly different than the types of folks that you listed off when you asked that question, Laura. So for me, it's black and white. It's like day and night.
I think one of the pieces that I'll add to that is that clinical mental health counseling, performance enhancement, sport and performance consulting, this is not advice giving. And so a number of the careers that Laura mentioned is very much about, I'm in this relationship and I don't know what to do. Well, try this. I'm having this thought and, well, have you tried thinking about it this way? Have you tried, maybe you should do this instead? That's not what either one of the professions that we teach and we train at Western States is about. In fact, it's a much harder road because there's not advice giving. There's a lot of encouragement toward self-awareness and self-exploration and trying to figure out what's happening from the client or the performer's perspective, rather than me saying, it sounds like this, and this is what I would recommend. The other pieces that very much, and I think I speak for Dr. Ohana and Dr. Cox as well, there's a lot of hard truths that need to be delivered that aren't always popular with clients. And in those 3 career fields that Laura mentioned, oftentimes those hard truths don't need to be delivered because we want to make sure that we're continuing to be liked by our clients in those pieces. I don't have that option. The ethics code that I'm bound to, the professional discourse that I'm bound to, and the field and the way it works means that being liked is a lovely benefit when it happens. But the role that I serve is to first and foremost put the client or the performer at the head of my work, which means that I may have to deliver something that doesn't make me more liked. It simply makes me more effective. And I think those are big pieces to look at in differentiating the fields that we're training here at Western States from those other fields that Laura mentioned.
Thank you so much. And we have time for one last question, and I think this is very interesting. In what context is the sport and performance psychology field growing most rapidly? Universities, professional teams, or is it happening mostly in private consulting settings?
Once again, I get to answer yes. So within the past, I would say probably 10 years, the field really has exploded in a number of different directions. And that comes from the fact that that performance psychology is really the growing side of this field. So originally, right, 10 years ago, we talked a lot about sports psychology and working in athletic populations. As many of you may know, before I moved out west and started working in university settings, I worked at the military academy, which is the university for our nation's Army officers. And while I was there, the chief of staff of the Army came into our conference room in our big building and said, I know that you do this for all of our athletes, but I want you all to do this for all of my soldiers. The military picked up on sports psychology very quickly and very early on. And so now the largest employer of sport and performance psychology trained individuals is the United States Army. That continues to be the case. As time has gone on, professional sport, while they've always had sort of outside consultants, that is folks that they've heard about, research they've read, coaches or player development staff or front office administrators have said, hey, let's bring in a sports psychology consultant to talk about this. That has changed drastically in the last 10 years. The current Major League Baseball contract actually requires every single team to have a sport and performance consultant, different from the licensed psychologist and licensed mental health professionals that they've always been required to have. So now, not only are they requiring that professional, but they're requiring 2 professionals for 2 very distinct jobs. Now, for those of you who know about professional baseball, it's not just the major league team. Every team has between 6 and 7 affiliates, including players from other countries, including the Dominican Republic, where many, many teams have additional players and additional training camps. My dog named Dodger as I'm talking about Major League Baseball. So the number of consultants that are being hired in Major League Baseball alone has really grown from just one per team to between 6 and 7 for the 32 teams that exist right now. That growth is continuing in university settings because athletic departments are now hiring different individuals, people that can run the sport and performance side alongside clinical professionals in athletic departments. One of our faculty members at UWS is actually the sport and performance consultant at Dartmouth and works alongside their licensed clinical professional in the athletic department as well. So what's really exciting about the profession right now is that people are recognizing the distinct nature of clinical mental health and sport and performance consulting. And while those relationships are unbelievably important, and the synergy between those two people is essential to the well-being and the sort of support network for all of our performers, there is a growing understanding that these are very different professionals. And so the field has really exploded both in sport and outside.
Thank you so much, Dr. Castillo, for that response. And so we have reached the end of our panel of experts roundtable session. So I'm going to proceed with the admissions presentation, just so that you get an idea of the application materials and some of the deadlines. But we are going to be having an open house before the deadline for spring 2022. So we have two deadlines here at UWS. So we have a priority deadline and then a final deadline. The priority deadline for spring 2022 will be January 21st, and then the final deadline will be February 4. So then our open house for spring 2022 will be sometime in between those deadlines. But thank you again for joining me, Dr. Ohana, Dr. Cox, and Dr. Castillo, and then I'll transition to the admissions presentation. Okay, I hope that you can see my screen. Okay, so basically the first step, if you were throughout the entire presentation, is to schedule an advising appointment with me, please, at your earliest convenience. You can visit www.uws.edu and then click on admissions, click on connect with admissions virtually, and then look for the program of your choosing. So as I mentioned before, I am the advisor for sport and performance psychology and clinical mental health counseling. We offer a graduate certificate in applied sports psychology that takes 6 to 9 months to get completed. We offer a master's in clinical mental health counseling that is about 2 to 2.5 years, depending on your enrollment as a full-time or part-time student. And then we offer a master's in sport and performance psychology that takes about 1.5 to 2 years to get completed, depending on your enrollment, again, as a full-time or part-time student. And then we offer the doctoral program, or EDD, in sport and performance psychology with a clinical track that has the specialization in clinical mental health counseling, and then the non-clinical track with 2 concentrations, individual studies, and then positive leadership and administration. So I know there are so many programs and so many different options, and that's why we from admissions encourage you to definitely go ahead and schedule an advising appointment so that we can go over your options. There are different options for you here. So you can either schedule virtually the advising appointment, or you can contact the 800 number that we have here on the screen, 800-641-5641. So once you basically schedule an advising appointment or are working towards your application, so we are expecting to get all application materials, that is the 2 letters of recommendation, official and unofficial transcripts from all post-secondary institutions attended, a resume, and then the personal statement before the priority deadline of January 21, if you want to also go ahead and apply for a scholarship that we offer to all incoming students.
Laura, did you intend to forward your slide deck?
Yes, I am intending to forward that. So if there are issues with my screen that is not sharing, so I will just go ahead and send the presentation to all the participants. Then I will continue. So basically for the application materials, so across all the programs, we will need official or unofficial transcripts from all post-secondary institutions attended, 2 letters of recommendation that can come from supervisors, colleagues, or former professors. And then we need, again, a resume where you highlight all your professional background, and then a personal statement. So each one of the programs have their own specific personal statement. So these should be available in the application portal, but if for some reason you have issues accessing that information, please email admissions and we will help you with what is needed. So in regards to what we're looking for prerequisites, there are no specific pre-required classes, and this is one of the questions that I get oftentimes. So as long as you have, if you're applying for the master's program, a 2.75 cumulative GPA from a regionally accredited institution, like a bachelor's degree from a regionally accredited institution, then you are eligible to apply for the master's program in clinical mental health counseling, as well as the graduate certificate and the master's in sport and performance psychology. So now the requirements in terms of the GPA change a little bit in the doctoral program. So for the combined doctoral program that offers the clinical mental health counseling specialization, would require a bachelor's or a master's with a 3.0 GPA. So if there is an issue around your GPA, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and then we will go over your options basically. So for the doctoral program, a standalone program, we ask that applicants bring a master's in any field with at least a 3.0 cumulative GPA. So as you can see, there are no specific pre-required coursework that will prevent you from enrolling in any of our programs. And so lastly, if you have questions related to financial aid, so this is the perfect time for you to start filling out your financial aid application. So the answer is all of our online programs are eligible for financial aid, except for the graduate certificate program. The graduate certificate program is a professional development program, and that's the main reason why this program is not eligible for financial aid. So if you are sort of like debating between 2 programs and you don't know what to choose in your FAFSA application, so please reach out to me and I will connect you with a financial aid advisor from the financial aid office, so that from our office we will help you with the financial aid application. So the other question that I typically get in admissions is if our programs offer at the doctoral or master's level a fellowship or a graduate teaching assistant as a way to support the expenses of our degrees. So the answer is no. Typically, these forms of financial aid are available for programs that are either hybrid programs with a combination between online classes and in-person classes, or programs that are fully in-person. So all of our programs are fully online. There are certain synchronous components in the doctoral program in which, for example, if you are going through the mentorship graduation experience, you will need to meet at regular times, but there is no like a particular class in person that you need to attend here in Portland, Oregon, in order to graduate from any of your programs. So thank you so much again for joining us today. We are expecting to receive your application or also your follow-up questions after this event. And it's really nice to see some familiar names for attendees. So thank you again for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. So bye-bye.